In this video, I'm going to show you how to generate a PDF file from a Rails 6 application. Originally, I thought this was going to be a simple tutorial, but as I started using some of the available and popular tools in Ruby, I found out that a lot of them don't work so well because they're rather outdated and they don't support some of the newer HTML or CSS features. So what I started out using was a tool called Wicked PDF, which is based on the WK HTML to PDF platform, which is an open source project. And that project doesn't really support Flexbox very well. And I had to do some digging around to finally arrive at a platform that generates PDFs that does work pretty well. And that ended up being a platform called Puppeteer. So if you want to stick around for the rest of this video, I'm going to show you the thought process that I went through in creating an application from scratch. And it should be a good overview of the types of problems that a application developer typically runs into. By the way, these programming tutorial videos are a new thing that I'm trying out. If you like the format that I'm doing, or if there's anything that you dislike about it, if there are things that you think I could do better, please leave some messages in the comments below. So here I'm starting a new Rails project from scratch. This is going to be a brand new application. And for the hypothetical scenario that we're using here, it's going to be an invoicing application where my goal is to get a view generated of an invoice, and we're going to turn that invoice into a PDF, which will be better equipped for printing and mailing out to people. So one of the first things I want to do is set up the gem file. And if you notice at my first attempt here, I'm installing Wicked PDF, which is the gem that I wanted to use for generating the PDFs. So at this point, I'm building a Rails controller which will create an invoices route, a URL that I could go to, and I'm also going to build a view with a template of an invoice that will sort of act as sort of like a dummy case which I could use to generate a PDF. So far, so good. So at this point, I start running into problems with Webpacker. In Rails 6, they completely replaced the asset pipeline from previous versions of Rails. So serving things like JavaScript and style sheets is a little bit more complicated now. On your local development server, you actually have to run two different servers. You have to run one for the Rails part of the application, your regular Rails server, but for the assets, they all have to be compiled by this application called Webpacker, and you have to run the asset compilation through a different port, something called Webpack Dev Server. It took me a little while to figure this out because I had to set up the Webpacker system, set up all the files associated with that. And when I was doing that, I discovered that my Node installation wasn't properly configured. So I had to reinstall the Node version manager, which is kind of like the Ruby version manager, RVM, but instead it's NVM. And I had to play around with the settings there a little bit to get this to work. So there it looks like the Webpack dev server is now running successfully, and I can move on to starting the Rails server. But I run into some problems with Yarn configuration, which is a Node module. It's a JavaScript sort of thing. And I found out this was actually related to my Node version manager, so I had to spend some time fixing that. But eventually I got it to run. So next up, I'm going to be making some adjustments to the Webpack configuration so that it loads things that it needs like jQuery and Bootstrap, which I'm going to use for styling on this invoicing form. And there you go. The Bootstrap styling is showing up, so that means that the style sheets are being served correctly, and I could proceed with making the actual form. So we finally got the template for our invoicing form complete. Now we're going to try to turn this demo into a PDF. So now I'm going to install this WK HTML to PDF dependency, which is the PDF rendering engine that's going to be used by Rails in the background to build an HTML document into PDF format. I'm going to be setting up a special rendering route in my controller so that when you specify the PDF format in the URL, it will automatically render it as a PDF file. So here it is now as an example. I'm looking at my route as PDF format, and as you probably notice, it doesn't look quite right. What's happening is the spacing is off, and that's because this background component doesn't support the Flexbox system very well, which is a CSS HTML feature used in Bootstrap, which I used for setting up my styling. So my next course of action was to look for some alternatives. Hopefully there was going to be a newer component out there, some type of newer rendering engine that doesn't have this incompatibility problem. Luckily I found a more up-to-date Ruby gem called Grover, which instead of being powered by the HTML to PDF library, it uses a library called Puppeteer that is tied in with the Google-backed open-source web browser rendering engine called Chromium. So let's take a look at getting this HTML page to build using Grover. The first thing we need to do is add Grover to our gem file and also update our JavaScript libraries to include the Puppeteer dependency. And now we could go into our Rails console and generate a PDF file using Grover's commands. One of the nice things about this library is that it will create a byte stream of information which you could keep in memory and store however you want, or you could pipe it directly into a PDF file through the file system commands. So what I've done here was as an example, I took the front page of GitHub. I used Grover/Puppeteer's library to download that HTML page from the front page of GitHub, and I saved it into a sample PDF, and everything seems to look okay so far. So the next thing I want to do here is render the invoice page in my application into a PDF. I'm going to trigger the page render by using the application controller render method from the console. And that's going to give us the HTML output that we want to convert into a PDF file. And I'm going to feed that into Grover, and it should give me a byte stream in PDF that I could save to file and then view it. So now we're looking at the result of that byte stream, and the formatting still doesn't look quite right. It took me a few hours of troubleshooting, but I eventually figured out the problem. The HTML that I was rendering in this case was pure HTML directly from the controller. It didn't have any of the style sheet assets loaded. So to do that, I had to pull the web page from the Rails server as a web request rather than using the console hack. So here we are running the command again, but using the localhost URL, and now it finally works. So that's my example tutorial here. If you liked this video and you found it useful, please like the video and subscribe to my channel for more.